You wake up in the back of your van. It's 22 degrees outside, your breath is hanging in the air, and you reach over to check your battery. Half gone. Overnight. You barely used a thing. I lived that exact morning for 3 winters straight. I was about to spend $900 on a generator to fix it. Then I found out the cold wasn't draining my battery at all. It was hiding it. Here's the truth I wish somebody had told me years ago. In freezing weather, the battery you already own gives you only half of what it holds. The other half is still in there. You just can't reach it. And there's a way to unlock it that costs nothing. A method farmers used 100 years ago before anybody sold them a solution. I remember the morning outside Cody, Wyoming, staring at a battery meter reading 51% when I knew I'd charged it full the day before. That number is what sent me down this whole road. And what I found traces back to a device patented in 1916, written up in an old government bulletin, and it works with the exact setup sitting in your van right now. You don't need to buy a single new part. So let me tell you what happened, because I was as stubborn and skeptical as anybody. For years, I did everything the modern way. When my power ran short in winter, I assumed I needed more power, more panels, a bigger battery. A generator humming outside my door at 6 in the morning, burning fuel I had to keep buying, waking up every soul in the campground and me right along with them. That's what everyone told me. That's what every video told me. Winter is hard on power, they said, so throw more equipment at it. But something never added up. I'd watch my battery drop overnight when nothing was running. No heater, no lights, no fridge. Just a battery sitting in the cold, quietly losing half its number by sunrise. And then, strangely, by early afternoon when the van warmed up a little, that number would climb back. Not from charging. It just came back on its own. That made no sense to me. A battery doesn't refill itself. So I started paying attention, and I started measuring, and what I learned changed everything about how I survive a winter in that van. Here's the first thing nobody explains to you. A battery is not a bucket. We all picture it like a bucket of water, and power pours out the bottom until it's empty. That picture is wrong, and that wrong picture is exactly why people waste money. A battery is a chemical reaction. Power comes out when the chemistry inside moves, and chemistry slows down when it gets cold. It doesn't disappear. It slows down, like honey in the fridge. The energy is still sitting in there, thick and stuck, but the battery can't hand it to you fast enough or fully enough while it's cold. The numbers on this shocked me when I finally dug them up. A standard lead-acid battery, the kind in most rigs and most cars, delivers right around 100% of its rated capacity at 77 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature they test them at. Room temperature, nice and cozy. Now, drop that same battery to 32 degrees, plain freezing, and it gives you only about 65 to 70% of its capacity. Drop it to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're down to right around 50%. Half. And if you're in a truly brutal spot, -20 and below, you can be scraping along at 40% or less. Let that land for a second. On a cold night, your 100 amp-hour battery is behaving like a 50 amp-hour battery. You didn't lose the battery, you lost access to half of it. And here's the part that got me angry once I understood it. When you buy a generator to make up that difference, you are paying hundreds of dollars, plus fuel forever, to replace power you already own and already paid for. It's sitting right there in your battery, frozen out of reach. So the real question was never how do I make more power? The real question was how do I reach the power I already have? And the moment I flipped that question around, everything got simpler and a whole lot cheaper. But before I tell you exactly how I did it, I need to tell you where this knowledge comes from, because it's not new, it's old. It's about 100 years old. And the fact that most of us never heard it is not an accident. Let me take you back to a farm in the 1920s. Before the power lines reached the countryside, farms ran on batteries. Real battery banks, big glass jars of them, charged by a little gas engine or a wind charger up on a pole. The most famous of these systems was called the Delco Light Plant, and it came from the mind of a man named Charles Kettering, the same inventor who gave us the electric starter for the automobile. He put his first home lighting plants into production around 1916, and within a decade they were humming in tens of thousands of farmhouses across America. Now here's what those farmers knew that we forgot. They knew, from hard experience, that a battery kept out in a cold shed in January was next to useless. It would sag and sputter and leave them in the dark. So what did they do? They didn't buy a bigger battery. They didn't have a store to run to. They moved the batteries. They put the battery bank in the cellar. In the root cellar, down in the ground, where the temperature holds steady, around 50 to 55 degrees all winter long, no matter how mean it gets outside. Some kept them in a corner of the kitchen near the stove. Some built a little insulated cabinet packed with sawdust or straw around the jars. They understood, without any fancy chart, that a warm battery is a full battery and a cold battery is a half-empty liar. I found this written plain as day in old rural electrification pamphlets and farm equipment manuals from the 1920s and 1930s. Keep your batteries in a warm, dry place. Protect them from the cold. It was common knowledge. Every farm kid knew it. Then something happened. In 1935, the government started the Rural Electrification Administration, and over the next 20 years, power lines marched out across the whole country. The farm battery bank went in the scrap heap, and with it went that everyday wisdom about keeping a battery warm to keep it strong. Nobody needed it anymore. The knowledge didn't get proven wrong. It just got unplugged and left to rot. And here is where I finally started to see who benefits from us forgetting. Because that simple truth, a warm battery gives you double what a cold one does, is not a secret to the people who make and sell power equipment. They know it cold. It's in every engineering handbook. But there's no money in telling you to wrap your battery in an old blanket and let it keep itself warm for free. There's a great deal of money in selling you a generator, and a fuel can, and a special cold weather battery at a premium price, and a bigger solar array to fight a problem that was never really about solar. I'm not saying anybody sat in a room and plotted against you. I'm saying that when a piece of knowledge saves you money and earns them nothing, that knowledge quietly stops getting mentioned. It falls out of the manuals. It vanishes from the store displays. Nobody puts it on a shelf because you can't put free on a shelf. And a whole generation of us grew up thinking winter power problems have only one answer, the expensive one, the one you keep paying for. So I got stubborn in the other direction. I decided to test the old farmers instead of the salesmen. And what I found in one single winter saved me that $900 and a whole lot more. Now, I know what some of you are thinking right about now. You're thinking this is fine for somebody with a fancy van build and a big lithium setup and a garage full of tools. You're thinking this isn't for you, because maybe you don't even have a van. Maybe you've got a modest little camper, or just a car in a cold driveway, or a small backup power station in the garage for when the lights go out. I want you to hear me clearly. This is for you especially. Because the whole beauty of what I'm about to show you is that it uses things you already own and costs you nothing. There is no special equipment. If you have a battery of any kind that has to survive the cold, this works. And I'll walk you through exactly how, step by step, so you can do it this very weekend with junk from your own closet. Let me tell you what I actually did that first winter, starting with the simplest thing. The first move cost me $0 and took about 10 minutes. I took my battery, which was mounted in an open compartment where the cold air poured right over it, and I boxed it in. I built a simple box around it out of an old foam cooler I already had, the cheap kind you get for picnics. I cut it to fit, set the battery inside, and packed the gaps with wadded-up wool blankets and an old sleeping bag I never used. That's it. That was the first step. And I want you to understand why it worked, because it's the same reason your grandmother's root cellar worked. A battery, even one just sitting there, gives off a tiny bit of heat, and when you charge it or draw power from it, it gives off more. In an open compartment, that little warmth blows away in an instant, and the battery matches the freezing air around it. But inside an insulated box, that warmth gets trapped. The battery makes its own little pocket of heat and lives in it. In my testing, with a good insulated box, my battery ran a solid 15 to 25 degrees warmer than the outside air, all night long, without any power source at all. Just trapped warmth. Think about what that does to those numbers I gave you. If it's 0 degrees outside, and my battery would normally sit at 0 and give me 50%. But instead, it's sitting at 22 or 25 degrees inside that box. I've just clawed back a huge chunk of capacity for the price of an old cooler and a blanket. I went from half a battery to nearly 3/4 of a battery overnight, and I didn't spend a dime or burn a drop of fuel. But insulation alone has a limit, and I hit it. Because insulation doesn't make heat, it only holds heat. On a string of bitter nights, even a well-wrapped battery slowly cools down because it isn't making much warmth on its own. I needed a little heat to trap, a source, something free. And that right there is why I started writing this down, every last bit of it, instead of letting it live only in my own head. What you're getting from me today: the warm battery, the trapped heat, the free warmth you already own, that's one night solved. But the cold doesn't come at you from one direction. It comes at your bed, your one warm room, your truck cab, your roof when the wet snow sits on it, your light after dark, and sometimes at the parking spot you're sleeping in. So I sat down and put the whole year on paper, method by method, every one of them cheap and proven and built, sitting down in under 20 minutes, written for a fixed income and an older back like mine. With the digging and the testing, I could never fit into a video like this one. If you want the complete version of what's working for you right now, scan the QR code right there on your screen, link in the description, pinned comment. Take the collection, and you'll know how to hold heat, keep water out, and read your city's rules before they read you. Now, back to the shed and the salesman. Because once I understood who profits from our forgetting, I stopped listening to them altogether. And that's where the second piece came in, and it's the piece almost nobody thinks about. The sun? Now, everybody knows solar panels make electricity from the sun, and in deep winter they don't make much, and that's the reason people give up on them. But I'm not talking about electricity here. I'm talking about plain, simple warmth. Heat you can feel on your face through a window on a cold, clear day. That heat is free, it's enormous, and most of us waste every bit of it. Here's what I did. On the south-facing side of my van, where the low winter sun comes in through the window for most of the day, I set out a couple of dark containers full of water. Old milk jugs, painted flat black, filled with water, and capped tight. I set them in the sunny spot on the floor where the light landed. Water is nature's battery for heat. It soaks up warmth slowly all day and gives it back slowly all night. Those black jugs sat in the winter sun and got genuinely warm to the touch by afternoon. Then, come evening, I moved them right up next to my insulated battery box, tucked in with it under the blankets. All night, those jugs bled their stored warmth into that little insulated pocket, and my battery rode out the freeze in comfort. This is not my clever invention. This is the oldest trick in the book. It's called thermal mass, and people have been using the sun to warm water and warm stone and warm brick for as long as there have been houses. The Romans did it. Pioneers put a hot stone from the fire, wrapped in cloth, at the foot of the bed. Farmers filled a jug with warm water for the calf in the barn. Free heat, caught in the day, released at night. We just forgot we were allowed to use it. So now I had two of my three pieces. Insulation to trap heat, thermal mass to store the sun's heat and feed it in slow. And the results were already dramatic. But I still hadn't found the piece that ties it all together, the one that made me feel like I'd stolen something back from people who'd been overcharging me for years. That piece came from an old government document, and it changes everything about how you build the box itself. Let me tell you how I stumbled onto it, because I nearly walked right past it. I was digging through old home economics archives, the kind of thing nobody reads anymore, looking for how those farm families kept things warm before electricity. And I kept running into references to something called the fireless cooker. I'd never heard of it. Turns out the government thought it was important enough to publish a whole farmer's bulletin about it back in the era of the First World War, teaching households how to build one at home. Here's what a fireless cooker was. You'd heat your pot of stew on the stove until it was good and hot. Then you'd take it off the flame and lower it into a wooden box packed tight with insulation, hay, straw, crumpled newspaper, wool, whatever you had. You'd close the lid. And that box, with no fire and no fuel at all, would keep cooking that stew for hours, holding it near boiling, because the insulation was so complete that the food's own heat couldn't escape. Families cooked entire meals this way while they were out working the fields. Zero fuel, just trapped heat. The instant I read that, it hit me like a slap. That is exactly what a battery box should be. Not a thin little cooler, a fireless cooker. A box so thickly, so completely insulated that whatever warmth goes in essentially cannot get out. The old bulletin was specific about what made it work, and this is the part I'd been getting wrong. It wasn't about one fancy material. It was about depth and dead air. They packed a thick layer, several inches of loose material all the way around, top and bottom included, especially the bottom, because that's where cold creeps up from the ground or the floor. The trick was to leave no gap, no thin spot, and to make the walls fat with trapped, still air, because still air is one of the best insulators on this earth, and it's completely free. So I rebuilt my battery box the fireless cooker way. I took a sturdy wooden crate, and inside it I built a nest. Several inches of packed material on every single side. I used old wool sweaters, a torn-up sleeping bag, and yes, actual straw I got for nothing from a feed store scrap pile. I set my battery down into that nest, so it was surrounded on all 6 sides, thick, with no cold bridge anywhere. On top, before the lid, I laid a folded wool blanket, and into that nest, each evening, went my sun-warmed black water jugs, tucked right against the battery. The difference was night and day. My old thin cooler box had held maybe 15 degrees of extra warmth. This fireless cooker box, packed deep like the bulletin taught, held a battery warm as toast through nights that dropped well below zero. I measured it. On a night that hit -8 outside, my bunny sat at just under 40 degrees inside that nest by morning. 40 degrees instead of -8. That's the difference between a battery giving me half its power and a battery giving me nearly all of it. And here is the whole thing put together, the complete free method, so you can build it yourself this weekend. You need a box, any box. A wooden crate, a tote, an old cooler, a cardboard carton doubled up. It truly does not matter. You need insulation, and you already own it. Old blankets, wool sweaters you never wear, a spare sleeping bag, crumpled newspaper, even bunched up plastic grocery bags will do in a pinch. Because remember, what you're really building is walls full of still, trapped air. You pack it thick. 3-4 inches on every side if you can manage it, and do not skip the bottom, because the floor steals more heat than you'd ever guess. You set your battery down in the middle of that nest, surrounded on all sides, with a folded blanket over the top before you close it. That alone, with no heat source at all, will keep your battery warmer than the freezing air and give you back a big slice of the capacity the cold was hiding. Then you add the sun. Fill a couple of dark jugs or bottles with water, set them where the low winter light hits them through your window all day, and let them soak up that free warmth. In the evening, tuck those warm jugs right into the nest alongside your battery. They'll feed heat into that sealed little pocket all night long. That's the entire method. A box you have, blankets you have, water and sunlight, both free. No generator, no fuel. No new battery, no bigger solar array. You are not making more power. You are stopping the cold from hiding the power you already own and already paid for. And it works with the exact battery sitting in your rig right now, whether that's a big lithium bank, a humble deep cycle, or the plain lead-acid battery under your hood. I want to be honest with you about a couple of things, because I'm your neighbor here, not a salesman. Keep the box ventilated a little if you're dealing with a lead-acid or flooded battery, because those can give off a bit of gas when charging, and you never want that trapped tight in a sealed space. A small gap for air, or a box that isn't perfectly airtight, is exactly right. You want to trap heat, not fumes. A sealed lithium battery is more forgiving on that front, but a little airflow never hurts anything. And keep it dry. The enemy of any battery is sitting in a puddle. So your nest should be dry material, and you should check it now and then. That's it. That's the whole of it. Simple enough that a farm family 100 years ago did it by instinct, and simple enough that you can do it before Sunday supper. Now let me tell you what really gets me about all this, sitting here having lived it. That farmer in 1925 knew something I didn't know at 60-some years old with all the internet in the world in my pocket. He knew that a battery is a living, chemical thing that hates the cold, and that the answer is to keep it warm, not to keep buying. He knew it because nobody had yet come along to sell him the forgetting. When the power lines came in 1935 and after, that little piece of wisdom got switched off along with the wind charger, and it stayed off for the better part of a century. But it was never really lost. It was sitting there the whole time, in a farmer's bulletin about a fireless cooker, in the corner of an old Delco manual, in the memory of people who kept their batteries in the cellar. It just needed somebody to plug it back in. And now I've handed it to you. If you take one feeling away from me today, let it be this: you are not powerless against the winter, and you were never as short on power as they made you feel. Half of what you needed was in your hands the whole time. Somebody just made sure you never learned how to reach it, because your reaching for it earned them nothing. I think you're the kind of person who feels that in your gut, the kind who suspects that a lot of what got called progress was really just somebody figuring out how to charge you monthly for something your grandparents did for free. If that's you, you're among friends here. So let me ask you something, and I truly want you to answer me. Have you ever gone out and bought a generator, or been about to fix a winter power problem that this warm battery trick would have solved for nothing? Or do you have an old-timer's cold weather trick of your own, something your father or grandmother did that the stores would never tell you? Tell me down in the comments. Write it out. I read them, and this is how we put the knowledge back together, one memory at a time. Don't just nod along and scroll off. Actually leave the comment, because somebody reading it tonight might be about to waste $900 the way I almost did. And if you want to keep recovering the things convenience quietly took from us, come stand with the rest of us who are digging it back up. Next time, I'm going to show you how those same off-grid farm families kept a whole cellar of food from freezing solid through the deepest part of winter without a lick of electricity, using nothing but the ground itself and one clever trick with a bucket. It's the other half of surviving the cold cheap, and once you see it, you'll never look at a hole in the ground the same way again. Stick with me, and let's keep bringing the old knowledge home. Before you go, one thing. This video showed why the cold hides your power. Inside my membership, the Old Ways Society, I walk you through the full cold battery insulation method, picking up right where we stopped. Get stuck? Ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be alone. Old Ways folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime. One click, no risk. Now that your van stays powered, let's keep you warm too. In the next video, I'll show you a simple, no-cost trick that keeps the cold out all winter. No propane needed. It's starting right here.